Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Alexandra, Experience Marketing Lead over here at Pixels, and it's my pleasure to have all of you here today. Before I welcome on this stage our amazing speakers, I would love to share a few housekeeping remarks with you. This webinar will be recorded, and just in case you need to leave early or you want to rewatch some of its parts, you'll be able to access the replay right after the event is over. During the webinar, our speakers would love to know what you think and how you feel about the topics that they are covering. So you can use the reactions functions that we have here on Livestorm, and you can send them some thumbs up. So let's practice that right now. Click on the React button at the bottom of the screen and send me over a few thumbs up. Amazing. I can see them coming. So please keep them coming during the webinar. It means so much for our speakers to feel your support and to feel that you're out there on the other side of the screen. And I can see that you're already using the chat, which is amazing because there are a few things that we would love you to share your opinion, but also we would love to hear your questions. So during the webinar, whenever you have a question that you would like Julie and Ryan to answer, please just type it in there and they will refer to it at the end of the session. With this, it's my pleasure to welcome on stage Julie Linz, Post-Production Lead at Stitch Fix, and Ryan Roberts, Customer Success Director over here at Pixels. Ryan, Julie, join me on the stage. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Julie. Hi, Ryan. Well, welcome. And with this, I'm going to jump off and let you take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Alexandra, for the introduction. As Alexandra said, my name is Ryan Roberts. I'm the Customer Success Director of North America for Pixels. I'm super excited to have Julie Linz of Stitch Fix. She is the post-production lead there. Join us today. Prior to Stitch Fix, she spent 5.5 years at Big Lots. Prior to that, 2.5 years at Zulily. So she's a wealth of knowledge, both in photography and post-production. She's also one of my favorite people to work with. She understands the importance of partnering, and she's just a lot of fun to get in the weeds on projects with. So thanks for joining us today, Julie.
Thank you. That's wonderful. I love the introduction. Love it.
Well, I'd really like to start these discussions with definitions of the keywords that we're going to be discussing. But I think I'm going to do something a little bit different this time. And instead of,
Ryan.
yeah, keeping us on our toes, you know what I'm saying? Instead of actually putting the definitions out there first, I want to ask the audience to tell me the first word that comes to mind when you hear these two words, collaborate and teamwork. What's the first word that comes to mind when you hear that? And Julie, if you want to put it in the chat too, you can also.
I mean, I'll just save it for later. Let's hear what the people have to say.
Communication. All right, I like that. Fun. Oh. Ooh. Joy. Transparency. Family. That's a great one. I kind of feel like we are family at this point, right, Julie?
We are. Yeah, no, it's like a really great relationship.
Yeah. All right, challenging. Like
here we're getting into it. Somebody knows.
Now we're getting down to
the hard stuff.
So, you know, going into the actual definitions, like I said, I like to define these things just so that we're all on the same page. So collaborate is to work jointly with others or together, especially in an intellectual endeavor. And Julie, I think that since we work together and collaborate, that basically says that we're intelligent.
Like at least
genius
that's what level.
Yeah,
genius
that's what I
absolutely.
heard from it at least. And then teamwork, work done by several associates with each doing a part, but all subordinating personal prominence to the efficiency of the whole. And you know, to me, that really sums it up, right? Because teamwork isn't always instinctual for all of us, right? And I love the part about subordinating personal prominence. I mean, let's admit it, in the creative field, that doesn't come naturally to everybody. And yet that's the root of working together. So, you know, I know that you work with what I call hybrid teams, right? You have internal stakeholders and you have external stakeholders. So let's first define, why do you work with hybrid teams? You know, what are the goals of collaborating with internal and external teams?
Yeah, so in all of the places that I've worked, we've had to rely on our external and internal partners, and a lot of that is for budget reasons. So, you know, I don't know any creative manager or team that's like, yeah, I just have all this money. They're just like feeding money at me. Like we have plenty, I'm loaded with cash, right? So somebody always has to find a better way to do things more efficiently. And so that's a really great reason why we rely on external partners to help us do those, other tasks that are more in the more of the day-to-day, right? So the day-to-day things that you can rely on somebody else to do faster, sometimes better. Is great reason for setting up external partners. And it also frees up your internal team to then concentrate on more creative, sometimes more difficult creative challenges and internal things that they need to work on. Sometimes it's just easier, right? You may have some crazy creative director out there who, is always throwing a new direction at you every 5 minutes, and you can't rely on an external team to do that. So you need to have your internal core team to be able to pivot really quickly and make it rain in the studio or something,
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
those external partners are essential in any workplace that I've been in, helping us out with those day-to-days. And in my experience, we've also been able to leverage like that 24 hours, right? So especially this day and age with working remotely, you can have people on all different time zones. So what's great sometimes with, depending on which external partner you're using, they can be doing that like overnight work for you while your internal team is offline, right? So it's, my overnight elves, sometimes I walk in and everything's done, and then we're ready to hit the ground running with whatever time zone you're working in, here in the States especially. So it's nice to know that you can get an external team to that set it and forget it kind of mode, and know that you can rely on them for the next morning to be there and to have the work that you needed done. And so that's a huge reason why we've worked with external teams. And also having your internal teams be able to check that work and to be able to have those relationships as well. And just, kind of building that communication, that bond between all of you, because in the end, you are one team.
That's awesome.
That's it.
That's awesome.
That's just, in the end of the day, that's it. You are one big team. Even if you're not sitting next to each other, even if you're not on, Zooms every day, you're still a huge part of that team, no matter if you're internal or external.
So there are challenges, right? With any collaboration, any teamwork, right? So tell me a little bit, about the challenges of working with hybrid teams.
So if you've never set up a hybrid team before, there's usually that big cost of your time in the beginning, right? So it's that time investment of getting an external partner to the spot that you need them. So sometimes it could be, a 6-month investment even. That's my experience for one partner that I set up. And it was just kind of that day-to-day maintenance of what do we need done? How do we need it? And then especially if you're working in an e-com retail space, you could have these curveballs thrown at you every day. Like you may have never had to shoot a dog collar before, right? But then all of a sudden you've got one. And like, now we've got to figure out how to shoot this dog collar, and we've got to get our external team on board on how to do it. Retouching or shooting or whatever it is, styling, writing copy. So it's that kind of initial time investment in the beginning that really, is probably the biggest challenge. And then once like I said, once you've got them onboarded and everybody's on the same page, it's easy. Like it should be smooth sailing, especially if you're keeping that relationship and you're nurturing it, and not just like turning a blind eye and saying, oh, this is your workload now, bye, deal with it.
Well, so I would imagine, for successful collaboration, that and the audience actually even put this in the chat whenever we threw those two words out. Trust and communication are key pillars for that, and so that makes me think, what comes first, trust or communication? Did we just uncover the next chicken and egg paradox? Wait a minute, audience. What comes first? Communication or trust? I'd love to see your responses. But yeah, so Julie, so what do you think?
Oh, so for me, it's
look
communication.
at that.
Oh,
It is
coming in
overwhelming.
hot.
I mean, overwhelming. All right, I like it. What's your experience, Julie?
For me, personally, it's communication. So it's kind of like that with any relationship, though, really. So a way I like to do it, and the way that works for me, is setting up those expectations up front. So what do you expect from me, and what do I expect from you? And so we set those up up front and level set, and then we talk about what happens when I don't meet your expectation. Then what do we do? Like, let's say, your delivery is going to be a day late. How do I want to know that information? What do we do together to make that happen faster or to get a better outcome? So for me, it's really about like, it's about the communication up front, and no one can meet your expectations if they don't know them, right? Like you're setting someone up for failure if you're like, oh, well, I thought you were going to do that. Well, if you never told somebody that's what you wanted, then they're going to fail. Like, right?
Yeah.
Like if you never told your husband you like mint chocolate chip ice cream at 3 a.m., then when he doesn't get it at 3 a.m. for you, like he's going to be in the doghouse, right? So like, yeah, you got to.
So what you're saying is you can apply this to all relationships.
Yes,
are we going into relationship counseling now? I think
let's do it.
All right.
Ryan and Julie, guidance counseling.
So let me ask a question. Since communication, since you said communication, since the audience unanimously said communication, let's talk about communication. Like, so what are your means of communication? Like, with your internal teams, how do you all go about, accomplishing this very important thing that we're calling communication?
Yeah, so I mean, it's probably annoying, but it's like all day, every day Slacks. It's daily stand-ups. And it's being available to jump on a call whenever they need it, wherever there's a question, making yourself available for questions as a leader, whether it's from your internal partners or your external partners. I mean, that's key. So, I have a policy, no question is too stupid. I have the time for anybody, even if I'm offline and you need to, message me or something, I'll get to it as soon as I can. But it's one of those things that you have to put the people that are working with you first. And especially when you're trying to help them figure out a problem. So, the day may end at 5, but sometimes you still have to help people, and that's okay because you want them to do a good job and you want that for your external and your internal partners for everything to go smoothly. So it's a lot of Slack, it's a lot of meetings, and then, scheduling those meetings with your external partners too. So making sure that you have, maybe it's a weekly, maybe it's a bi-weekly meeting, but it's just to connect with them and to see them. And even if you don't have a lot to talk about, sometimes you'll uncover you have a lot to talk about once you start seeing each other face to face, right?
Yes.
And so maybe it's just about the weather or the kids, but that also helps build that communication.
Mint chocolate chip ice cream at 3 a.m.
Exactly. Right. You never
know.
Now,
so do your means of communication, do they change depending if it's internal or external, or are they the same?
I think things are so much different since COVID, right? So
yeah.
Internal, it is obviously easier to just pop on over to somebody's desk, but sometimes there's some value in actually setting aside time for someone, right? To set aside a physical calendar invite for someone makes that person feel heard and more important, right? And then just kind of like breeze them by, dropping something off on their desk, breeze them on by again. Like that can get kind of crazy, especially if you're in a big studio or, working somewhere where there's a lot of movement around. So that can get really distracting, especially like I remember I was in that scenario one time where we were internal and it was I was on a retouching team at the time that was like literally sitting in the middle of like the buyer's floor. So it was just like buyers coming at you constantly or like behind your back, like watching you edit. Like, I don't like that. I'm like, oh God.
Wait, so, is that like analog Slack?
It was analog Slack. Talk about a high stress environment, they're just right behind you all the time.
Let me ask you a question as far as like with communication, how do you avoid bottlenecks, and like with internal and external teams, how do you go about so that, that communication is efficient and quick? What have you found that works to do that?
Yeah, I think it's probably still the popping on the Zoom calls. It's the Slacking. For me, it's a really easy way to Slack somebody. And if you guys can't resolve it in a Slack, I would say within a few minutes, then it might need to happen in a meeting, right? Or if you've had the same problem a couple times and you've been talking via Slack, sometimes it's really great to just roll up your sleeve and say, okay, look, I'm just going to have to show you some visuals. I'm going to have to show you what's happening. Let's get on a call. Give me your calendar. We'll jump on a call. And I think that's probably my, after 2 times and we're still not meeting it or we're still not understanding each other without communicating face to face, then I think it's time for the call and jump on there and hash it out.
And also just knowing the right person to go to, right? I mean,
yes, absolutely.
It's like if it's a technical thing, you go to, Jane, and if it's a creative thing, you go to Jane's counterpart, Joe. So yeah, just know the right person to go to. So listen, there's certainly a lot of benefits of collaboration, but it's not always easy. So let's get into the nitty gritty. Can you give any examples of maybe where the collaboration presented some challenges and you were able to overcome them?
Yeah, so I was actually managing a studio at the beginning of the pandemic. So obviously there was no rule books for anybody during that time. And it went from we'll see you tomorrow till we don't know when we'll see you again. And having to navigate with HR and just the people that reported to me their thoughts and feelings and fears of, you know, being in a space where they were going to have to continue to make work, right? So the team's going to have to continue to come in and produce imagery. And really just knowing those people and getting to know them before that pandemic happened helped so much, because I was able to, you know, help them not only navigate emotionally, but, you know, physically, you know, making sure they were in a healthy, safety space. And then we also were able to rely on our external partners as well during that time, when we were not even allowed to be in the studio, or we weren't allowed to bring people into the studio to shoot. So those external partners that we had at the time that we had already established relationships with, we were able to then call on them and say, hey, this is really difficult right now. Like, is there a way we can do this shoot in your studio? Is there a way we can have a model? What can we do to help you make this a safe space for everybody and still get the job done? And so that was probably the biggest challenge I've had. And the one wonderful thing about it was it helped you learn how to do what we do now every day, right? How to be remote, how to talk to people all over the country. And so it was kind of a weird silver lining to learning, because you had to learn so quickly. Like, I didn't even know about Slack and Teams until the pandemic, right? I wasn't on these things all the time, right? And now you like live by them, right? So
100%.
there is some beauty behind it. And it really did help you learn how to communicate even better, right? Because you had to, right? You couldn't do the desk popovers. You couldn't do the jump down and put this assignment on someone's desk. You had to figure out a way to get it through on a email, a Slack, or, you know, a Teams call.
I mean, COVID really did. It made us rethink everything, right? And gave us the latitude to be able to implement new ways of doing things, because we just had to. And yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of good came out of that, and we're certainly, you know, running with those learnings and applying, you know, the best practices that we learned from that moving forward. But, you know, like, so, you know, teamwork isn't always kumbaya. There's you know, if we all agreed, we'd live in a very boring world, and the content that we made would be, you know, pretty boring. So, you know, what are some examples of, like, you know, maybe where you had some disagreement, you had to say no, dare I say, you know, to your team, and how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so if you're in that creative leadership position, it can get tough, right? So most places that I've worked, you've got a buying team or you've got a creative client, and they want what they want, and they want it now, and they want it faster, and they want it faster than yesterday, even though they just told you today. So it's one of those situations where you have to know what your team is capable of. And that comes from just good old research, right? So that comes from knowing like, okay, my team can shoot 40 candles in 8 hours. If you come down and ask me to shoot 200 candles in 8 hours, we can't do that. So now we're going to have to figure out a way to make that happen, right? So I think starting with the basics of knowing like what your team is capable of. And then there's the delicate, you know, dance of figuring out whose requests are the top, right? And sometimes it's because it's coming from the CEO, and sometimes it's coming because there's a truck out back with all of the shipment on it and it has to go to the store now. Like, you have to be able to kind of know your business in general, and not just your focus of a creative, but know the business and know like, okay, this is really, really hot. This is truly really hot. Or this person thinks it's hot, but it goes live in three weeks. Or this person's trying to get a discount on a print deadline. So like, that's when you have to prioritize, right? And say, okay, yours is really, really urgent, and I'm sorry I can't get to yours yet, but here's our plan, and giving people those timelines too. So when you're just saying no, and then it's out in the ether and they don't know when they're going to expect anything from you, that's really difficult for you, for me, for anybody, right? So that's when you have to come, okay, no, I'm not going to be able to do that this time, unfortunately, in this timeline, but hey, I can get you in next week on Tuesday. You want to talk about it before then? You know, like just making sure that they still feel heard, and no, it's just not no, bye. Even if you feel like that on the inside sometimes, but you still gotta get the work done, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're basically you're supporting team communication, right? Because that's what that boils down to, is open communication. But like, you know, more importantly, having developed relationships where everyone's, you know, comfortable being honest with one another, and even when it's not what they want to hear, you know. So it's basically aligning the expectations and capabilities while encouraging, you know, the free sharing of ideas. And so, along the lines of, encouraging free sharing of ideas and creativity, how have you gone about doing that with your teams?
Yeah, so I think it really comes down to just knowing who you have on your team. And if you're fortunate enough to hire those people, or maybe you've inherited a team, right? So just kind of knowing that most of the people that are on your team, if you're managing a team of creatives, did not dream of one day being in a high pressure e-commerce, fast paced environment when they were like sitting in art school or like doodling on, like no one's like, yeah, but this really gets me going every day. Like, let's do it. Let's just,
I bet I can do 200 shots a day.
Right. And I'd love to be dictated exactly how to do it too. Right. Like if you're working with artists or you are an artist, that wasn't what they expected, but this is where you are and you're in it together. Right. So how do you foster that creativity still, even when you might have to, adhere to these brand guides and adhere to, crazy ideas that you might not agree with, right? So a lot of it is just getting to know the people that are under you. And maybe it's just very simple, just being like a decent human being, like, golden ruling it a little bit. Like, I want people to talk to me like that. I want my mentors and bosses to talk like me that. I'm going to do the same for the people that are under me, right? So, one of the good things that we can do if you're fortunate enough to be in a studio situation, even if you are, managing retouchers, it's just giving them a little bit of space to be creative. And so maybe that means, clearing their calendar for a day and say, hey, we're not shooting any e-com today. We're not shooting any editorial. We're not writing. We're not retouching. We're doing our own thing. Having a collaborative space where they can work together, it can really, I promise you that it will go down the line in all of what they do. So if you, I'll give a great example. I had a phenomenal photographer that reported to me, and she was great at everything and just a lovely human being on top of that, right? And her lighting was incredible. And so she would light these wine glasses we were shooting, and they would just be beautiful, right? And then one day we got to do kind of like a freestyle Friday, which is what we would shut down the studio for like a Friday every couple months, right? And let the team get down into it and really have fun. And she just did this beautiful, beautiful editorial, work that she did. And she lit this, this little tablescape and this little wine glass, and it was amazing. And I promise you, the next time we had to shoot wine glasses, she was doing that still, even in an e-com capacity. And so it was one of those things that like, it's just going to keep trickling down, and you have to keep encouraging it. And that also, like, her shooting that wine glass then challenged the retouchers to edit, like, you know what I mean? So you're all learning a little bit, right? Like, and to see it all coming together collaboratively, it was just really beautiful. And I highly encourage it. And even if it's, you're managing a team of retouchers, maybe it's like, I can think of an example right now where, you make a silly movie poster, and, put people, just what our teams have done and to make each other stay creative is wild sometimes. And I love it. And I have to keep fostering it. And also within myself, right? So I'm a person that, like, I can't stare at spreadsheets all day. I love to make a good presentation deck, but like, that's not,
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
It breaks your brain a little bit after a while, right? So still like rolling up my sleeves and like doing art, like I make art still, right? So even just fostering that within yourself still only can help the team of creatives under you, right?
Yeah, I love hearing that that you did that. You do that. I did a very similar thing when I was running studios. Is I realized that the people didn't come in and get work to paint Sykes, right? Like you need to allow them to have this time to go in and get their hands dirty, and you find that or at least I found that really allowed them to learn a lot faster than watching other people, where they were just actually touching the cameras and the lighting and everything. And at the end of the day, it benefits them, but it benefited the studio as well. And it sounds like your experience there is very similar.
And they're allowed to make mistakes during that time too, right? And learn from those mistakes. It's not this like high pressure moment where it's like, okay, I can't make a mistake. I got to crank through 50 of these. I don't have time to make a mistake or time to play around. Those moments will allow that. And then they can learn from their mistakes too.
And then there's always the happy mistake that then becomes best practice moving forward, right?
yes, of course.
So you and I've had some really funny conversations since we've been working together about quality control and how it can turn into rabbit holes.
Oh God, yeah.
So why don't you share some of your thoughts about that with our audience, because I really like your take on it.
Yeah, so managing a team of people that are QCing someone else's work, right? It's tough because you are ultimately the person that has to call out people's mistakes. So that
Sure.
like you have to have a delicate team to do that, and a team of also good human beings and people that are great at like being really decisive in a moment. And so like one of those, one of those good things I think about, and it's kind of knowing, like, again, knowing your business is knowing what your site is capable of. So if you are zoomed in at 400% on an image that you're QCing and your site only supports 100%, you might be a little too close in there, friends.
Yes.
Because no one's doing it perfect at 400%. So think about your site experience. Think about how your customer is viewing this. I mean, if it's a billboard or if it's going to be seen on a mobile device, right? You got to think about like the end result and making sure that you guys are not so focused on the tiny details. Not to say that details aren't important, because we all need those eagle eyes, but
Yes.
400% is a little much for
100% details if the site supports it, not 400% detail. Right.
Yeah. You're going to set somebody up for failure if you're going in at 400%. I promise you that. And it's also, the amount of effort, right? So like if you're the time that's spent in someone editing at 400% or someone QCing at 400%, like is the juice really worth the squeeze at the end of the day? Like you gotta have to keep your KPIs up. You have to, you have goals, right? And if you get stuck in that minutia, like, God, man, you're not going to hit them. You're just going to fail. There's going to be a big old backlog.
and as you said, it's not worth the juice, right? Like that additional, it will never be, that benefit will never be realized. So, so teams, require a strong leader to make sure they're properly aligned. And I think that, a strong leader is comfortable allowing people to challenge one another, to get the process dialed in and get the strongest results. What are some examples of how strong leadership benefited teamwork and collaboration in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's all about planning. So if you are a part of a team that is really great at planning and really great at forecasting, you can then pass on the ease of that planning to your team and to your external partners, right? So where you get tripped up sometimes is, if you are not fortunate enough to have a great planner or a great forecasting team, that's when you're going to get hit with these big, waves almost. And knowing what your external partner is able to do for you during those waves is, essential. So, you may only be asking them to edit 100 images a day, but asking those questions like, well, what if I had to give you 500? Could you do it? How will we do it together? Like, so, knowing that those times are going to happen no matter what business you're in. You are going to get those surprise moments, but it's planning for how I'm going to react during those surprise moments, right? And what can we pull? What can we do? How can we help each other? The thing that gets tricky is when those surprise moments start becoming the norm. And that's when you as a leader have to go and have those bigger conversations. Like, why am I always getting surprised? Like, I would like to not be. Like, let's figure out how I don't get surprised every day. How about that? Like, what can I do to help you not surprise me?
That's awesome. And that basically boils back to what you're saying in the beginning, is the planning, right? It's like proper planning keeps these surprises from popping up. Well, I'm looking at the time, and I'm realizing that we, as we do, we tend to rattle on, and wanted to get a little bit of Q&A in here. So let me see if I know how to do this. Let's see. All right. Hang on one second. All right. So George asked, how do you manage communication and collaboration when working remotely in different time zones around the globe? Are virtual calls enough?
Yeah, I think they are. I do it every day, right? So I work, I'm here on the East Coast. You guys are on the West Coast. We have our team in Vietnam. I have reports for me that are on the West Coast and the East Coast. So I think making sure that you and your internal team have a really strong, group of people that are on all the time zones that can help support any time zone that comes in. And I think also just knowing that there might be a mistake if no one's around, right? And you might just have to say, okay, this happened because no one was available from midnight to 5 a.m. and we'll figure it out in the morning. But as long as you know about it, so as long as someone has Slacked me and said, oh, hey, Julie, this happened. And when you get online, can we talk about it, kind of thing. I think that's the best way to do it. And that's my experience so far. But it is nice to see people on a Zoom call every now and again. But
100%. And there's something about the free flow of ideas and solutions whenever you have this kind of interaction as opposed to textual, right? Like tones
Oh,
don't
yeah.
get tones don't get lost.
Yeah.
You know, which I think is a major challenge for communication in this day and age, is especially since everything's done so textual. People read it the way they want to read it, but that might not be how it was typed.
And you're also oftentimes, if you're working across all these different time zones, you may be working across, you know, with partners that English isn't their first language too. So like knowing like the sensitivities and the nuances between language sometimes too, that, you know, that isn't directed at that it doesn't mean that. But when you can get on a call with somebody and you can see like their face, their hands, you know, whatever it is, sometimes it's a lot easier to solve it, and, you know, nobody gets hurt feelings.
I mean, imagine trying to do this over text. It just wouldn't work. I don't think the audience would really like it, I guess. So we got another question here. Any advice for producers with staying creative when most of your work is logistical?
Oof, poor producers. Yeah, you guys do have it rough. Maybe, sorry, but we need you. We need you so much. Like we need those producers, man. I can tell you. Anyway, for producers, I would say find your little team that you like. So maybe it's, you know, I know you're going to have your 9 to 5 and you're going to be cranking away on these projects for everybody else, but maybe it's on your Saturday. You loved that stylist that you worked with, or you love that photographer. Let's get them together and, I don't know, find a little space. Maybe it's your kitchen even, and have some fun with each other, not in a weird way. But like get some good work in, and that can be some great portfolio building pieces for yourself too, since a lot of what you're getting as a producer is just projects dictated to you. They're not the projects you necessarily want to do. So make your own, and you know, find the people you love working with.
I mean, it's really interesting because like that's basically applying what you said that you did with creatives into the production role, right? It's like, you know, producers you know, got into it for a reason, and it might not be what they're executing 9 to 5. So, you know, figure out ways to do your own test, you know, your own production test, so to speak.
And I promise the people that you ask are probably going to be super complimented too. Like the people that you want to go and like do something really cool with, they're kind of be like, oh wow, she came to me, or he came to me. This is really awesome. I feel really honored, right?
And really solidifies the relationship, right? I mean, and
yes, and you know what? They're going to keep booking you. They're going to keep adding you to that roster.
It benefits the 9 to 5 projects.
Yeah, it does.
So this one I'm looking forward to. Ready? What's the craziest request you've been asked to do in a studio, and how did you navigate through that with the person requesting the shot and your team to execute / find it solved?
Oh my word. I was asked one time, I had a really fun project that I was really stoked to do. It was kind of like an April showers theme, right? And I was asked by one of my partners to literally make it rain with a hose in the studio with a child in the shot. And A, that just wasn't safe. B, we weren't set up even remotely, not even remotely set up for it. And so at first I was like, oh, so we're spitballing these cool ideas, like, okay, we can get this cut paper, we can do this thing, we're pulling inspo swipes that have nothing to do with actually making it physically rain. And then that person very much like was not pleased with our stuff that we came up with and was like, gotta make it rain for real, gotta make it rain. And we were like, hey, we're not going to make it rain. Like, this is kind of a safety thing. Also, this is a little bit ludicrous for the space we had. And also, where am I going to put all this water? So, but one of our external partners could make it rain. So I called our external partners and I said, hey, would you like to make it rain for this person? And they said no, but they could do it. If they got a little more notice, they would be able to do it. So we always had it in our back burner that if we ever needed to really make it rain, we could call on this other external partner to make it rain.
And every time you said that, I was just picturing them going like this with hundreds. Is that what you're talking about? Or
I'm talking about showering you with water.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Went in the wrong direction.
And no one was making it rain money at me either.
Okay.
Unfortunately. Maybe if I got a little bit of that kickback money, we could have made it rain.
I've got one additional question here. In a studio workflow, especially now with e-commerce, how's it been to find talents with a balance between creative skills and more precise, organized processes, or more? Sorry, I totally killed that one. With a balance between creative skills and more precise, organized / process oriented.
So you're
like, how do you find that balance?
You got to find the unicorns, right? So there's unicorns out there. I have some, and I'm not giving them up. But there's unicorns out there. Everyone, so looking for those people that are obviously have that experience before. So people who have come from an e-commerce background know the ropes, right? They know fast paced, they know KPIs, they know it's not going to be, Vogue magazine stuff. So seeking out those people is really great. And sometimes if you find someone that is the Vogue magazine person and maybe they interviewed, really level setting and telling them, hey, I know you do great work doing this kind of thing, but like, we're going to need this. Can you do this? And if they can't, they might know somebody that does. A lot of times you might not be the right one for the job, but you're like, oh man, you know what? Chelsea's awesome at this. Let me kick this over to Chelsea and see if she's into it. So it could be something just even that simple. And again, it goes back to communication.
Yeah,
and being upfront and honest, and then you get the trust, chicken and eggs.
And eggs. And I know one of the unicorns that I think you're speaking of. But we got to wrap it now because we have gone over, Julie, as we do when we get on. Sorry, guys. But I wanted to just do a quick, there's Alexandra. She will tell us what we have coming up in September.
Amazing. Well, first of all, Ryan, Julie, thank you so much. I think it's been an incredible conversation. You can judge by all the reactions, by all the comments in the chat that you really got through to people. And I think everyone could relate what you were saying. So thank you so much for doing this. And well, if everyone who is watching us right now is craving also for some in-person connection, then you're more than welcome to explore our in-person event that is coming up in Barcelona on September 15th. Flow will be there for you, and you can check it out by following the link in the chat. This is our event series created for photo and video production professionals, where we will talk about collaboration, about navigating the challenges that you face in the studios, and I'm sure it will be amazing, and we would love to see you all there.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Alexandra. Thank you so much, Julie. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on, and also to just witness the overhaul that you and your team have been doing recently over at Stitch Fix. It's amazing work you guys are doing. So with that, goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.